tried to stop procrastinating, people pleasing, or being a perfectionist and not been able to stop it? Today's episode is for you. You may not realize that there is something specific that you need to uncover. It's a sneaky, hidden thing that is actually causing your self sabotage. And in today's episode of Unlock Your Blocks, I'm going to walk you through just that. My name is Elyssa Smith. I'm a trauma informed life strategist. And today we're going to focus in on this thing that you may be missing if you've tried to stop these unhelpful behaviors and haven't been successful just yet. Don't worry, in this short episode, we're going to talk exactly about what this is that you need to uncover and how to stop it for good. So I'm talking about trauma. Now, when you think of trauma, you probably think about something big and bad, like an accident or being a war veteran. Most of us do, and that is the most commonly recognized type of trauma that causes PTSD. However, there are other types of trauma, and there's a very sneaky type that actually causes self-sabotage behaviors. So let's just talk about these types of trauma. So we have big T trauma, right? It's big, bad stuff, should never happen to anyone, usually violent or deprives you of a basic need in a way that should never have happened. Then we have little T trauma. This is another clinical type of trauma, and it is smaller needs that, or actually more non-violent things, needs that go unmet or non-violent types of trauma could be ongoing, could be like bullying, or maybe something happened, you lost a pet or a family or relative that was older and you didn't know how to cope with the feelings, right? These are still traumas, but they're not identified as big T trauma that is usually violent or very blatant. I needed a way to talk to my clients. A couple of years ago, I started realizing I needed something to talk about this other sneaky type of trauma that doesn't exactly get on the radar as little T or big T trauma. So I've coined it tiny T trauma. And what I mean by tiny T trauma is smaller emotional needs going unmet in childhood. So it could be developmental needs that weren't met. You never learned how to manage feelings. Maybe you had performance-based self-worth growing up. I have all these things, and that's why I'm an expert at what I do now. And I've been able to help tons and tons of women around the world to actually identify the tiny T traumas that are usually very sneaky because your brain, it's this beautiful survival mechanism that pops in anytime that your brain perceives you're not getting your needs met the way that it would be ideally met. When that happens, your amygdala, the survival part of the brain, sets into a response, a survival response in the sympathetic nervous system. And basically that nervous system response is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Most of us know fight and flight, right? Freeze is maybe if you get tongue-tied or if you start overthinking, you get paralyzed, you can't do it. A lot of times that happens in the procrastination response. Or the fawn response is to please your way to safety. All of those things have their root in childhood programming, and you may not even realize how subtly those things are affecting you because they were so helpful to be protector parts for you in the beginning. They helped you survive, they got you through, and now you're an adult who has procrastination tendencies or perfectionism tendencies that are a bit crippling. You're not the only one. That's why I'm here. That's what's happened to me. And I've found ways to overcome it and reprogram these parts of the brain that initially started out really helpful and now they're not so helpful. So procrastinating, people pleasing, and perfectionism, they also contribute to things like imposter syndrome and your negative self-talk because your survival brain is always watching. It's wondering, am I going to be safe? Will I have all my needs met? Is this going to be something that is going to jeopardize my potential for being accepted in the herd? You know, it's a very primal mentality, this survival brain. It's exhausting, right? If you procrastinate or if you're a perfectionist or if you're constantly trying to think about how you can influence someone to like you or think about you positively, or you're worried about being a burden to people when you are overloaded and need to ask for help, man, it is such a load on our nervous system and on our physical body and on our mentality and on our emotions. All these different areas are affected by the constant self-sabotage effect. So when we are adults, the challenge is then to start actually rewiring the original thought process that came into being to originally protect us. Because otherwise we end up burned out. We end up being slowed down. We end up getting really stuck maybe in an overthinking cycle. We get decision fatigue. We start to not be able to connect really well in relationships. Maybe you have anxious attachment or avoidant attachment or all kinds of other things that could be happening in your relationships as a result of constantly second guessing yourself. So procrastination, perfectionism, people pleasing, all of those play into this negative thing that is always going in our mind, subconsciously usually, but you might hear some of those thoughts. I mean, I had a client yesterday that reached out to me and said, "Hey, I just want to note some progress here. I had a period of time this afternoon where I laid down and took a nap," because she makes her own schedule for her business. And it's not a client facing business, so she can do that. But she's never been able to allow herself to do that without feeling lazy before yesterday. And so she said, and I looked at my planner and I had this gap in my productivity. And she said, and I was just second guessing. And I was like, oh, should I have done that? But then I logically walked myself back through the last 24 hours. She went out of town a round trip of 7 hours. She did a road trip of a round trip that took her 7 hours to complete, 3.5 hours. And she went to a big meeting. She had a bunch of business things that were going on. And then the next morning, so after getting in after midnight, the next morning, she had a super early morning appointment and then another appointment with clients. And then, so it made sense that she caught up on rest during that time. But if you're perfectionistic, you won't allow yourself to do that because you're not being productive. If you're a procrastinator, you might see that as a way that you might judge yourself for putting things off because you're pushing them back during those 3 hours that you're resting. So your body can never fully be at rest if you believe that rest makes you lazy, but you're always going to be burned out with that mentality. So we have to actually adapt our brain wiring to the current belief system that's appropriate. Old belief system says, if I don't please you, the world at large, if I don't please the world, if I don't get this right and perfect, if I don't make sure that I'm doing things exactly right, then I'm going to be judged on the product, the outcome and the results. I'm going to be rejected by the herd. I'm going to be abandoned and I'm going to be eaten by a predator. So the primal part of the brain that's in charge of this process is really smart in that when you're a baby and a toddler, if there are needs going unmet, you can't just be like, well, I guess I'm not going to be a part of the herd. No way. It's going to adapt. You're going to take the role that you need to take in order for you to get your needs met in the best way possible. Update. You're now the adult in your life. You are now the parent in charge. You are now the one that can make sure you don't go without food, you don't go without clothing, you don't get rejected from the herd. You are the one who makes sure that you have intrinsic self-worth to make sure you are celebrating your wins in a way that resonates with your system. I'm making progress. I'm growing. I'm doing my best and my best is enough. Those are not messages we get when we grow up as little tiny perfectionists, little tiny procrastinators. We don't get those messages back then, but we can update the program now. So there are a few ways that you can take a look at this solution. Okay. So we need to view these parts of us, the procrastination, perfectionism, people pleasing, imposter syndrome, negative self-talk. They're all protector parts. We need to love these parts, but it's a little complex to try and do that if they've been the bane of your existence as an adult. So here's where we start. You ask yourself the question, if you see these things popping up and you're like, okay, I'm procrastinating this. You simply start with a question. This is how you get to the root of the hidden trauma that may be causing your self-sabotage. This is the question. What feels unsafe about this? So if you are being a perfectionist and you can't just lay the project down when it's good enough, what doesn't feel safe about leaving the project where it is? If you're a people pleaser and you don't want to say no, you feel obligated to say yes, what feels unsafe about saying no here? If you're a procrastinator, what feels unsafe about completing this project? When you start with that question, then you can ask, what is your sabotage protecting you from? What is the initial, like the really deep belief that is behind this? Because you are doing these bad behaviors, I'm giving air quotes, for a good reason. There's a very valid reason that you have these behaviors. So you need to bring your system up to date and really identify what's it scared of. Why is it protecting you this way? So then you update it to the programming. I am keeping my own self safe now. I can bounce back from anything. Even if I get rejected, I will take care of myself and make sure that I have everything that I need. So when you are updating the programming, it's really important you're taking care of your physical body. You're sending messages to the primal system. Hey, we actually can have enough to eat. We can have enough rest. We are taking care of ourselves. We don't need to depend on a boss, a partner, a parent, a family of origin member to make sure that they accept us because we accept ourselves. I accept myself, therefore, I will be okay if someone else rejects me. So, this is an important piece of the journey not to do by yourself. And I just want to encourage you that let this be for you. If this is resonating with you, this is your sign to get someone else involved with you, someone who has professional expertise. It doesn't have to be me, but it could be me. You can book, if you're a female, you can book a 15-minute session with me, and I will help you actually uncover where the original belief came from in that session. And then we can talk about what your next steps are. So get a coach involved, get a therapist involved. I've done other episodes on the pod about what type of trauma work is really helpful when you've been through trauma. So make sure that you're not doing this alone. It's even better if you have some besties that are doing the inner work as well. Feel free to pass this episode along to somebody if you're like, hey, I would love to have some support and validation as I'm going through this journey. Here are the things I'm working on. So I'm just so glad that you're here today. I'm so glad that you're working on the next piece for you to build your dream life and to get unstuck in all the different areas of life. So I hope this was helpful for you. Please book your 15-minute chat if you want to, and I will see you here next time. Until then, take such good care of yourself.